It's Saturday, June 15th, 2019. We're going to talk about why the free market is the best cure for bigotry, how tariffs have eaten away the tax cut benefits, a little situation at Oberlin College, and Greg Abbott's fun with signing bills on social media.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the Libation Station. It is the Barney and Clyde podcast show, presented fortnightly and forthrightly from here at the Libation Station. It's Saturday morning, so we're having Komodo Dragon coffee.
It was very nice.
Mm-hmm. And so you get yourself something that you deem appropriate. You may be watching this in the evening and want something a little more bracing. That's cool.
And if you have Starbucks stock, you're welcome.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. This is. We're building a following. I've been gratified to watch the viewership grow on this as we go along, and we get some folks chiming in on email, some responses to what we're doing, and that's always great. But there's some new ones, and for anybody who's joining us for the first time, what we do is examine a few things each time, and we bring a libertarian perspective and a conservative perspective about, and those two perspectives are going to have a fairly big Venn diagram overlap. There will be some areas outside that, and that makes for an interesting exploration as well.
Yeah.
So that's what we do, and that's what you're partaking of here.
And I think that our Venn diagram overlap exists primarily because, as you've said many times, that the primacy of freedom is the most important thing in human existence, and our interpretations of it have proven to be the most effective mechanism for reducing poverty in history. Okay, so the primacy of freedom.
Yes.
I think is something that we'd agree that the left has lost sight of.
Absolutely.
And I think that all of our friends on the left would call themselves defenders of freedom, and I think that that's at least true in their minds. But, the implementation tends to be on the authoritarian side.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I see them doing often is turning that around and saying that the market has created this authoritarianism. The market has created bigotry and prejudice and force.
Mm-hmm. Something that I'd long wanted to get a better handle on was how the concept of public accommodation figures into all of this. When a number of these cases of concerning Christian wedding service providers started arising in the last few years.
Right.
Barnell Stutzman's Flower Shop and Jack Phillips Bakery in the Denver area, and there was a wedding chapel provider in upstate New York, and there's been a few of those. And when Alliance Defending Freedom and Liberty Fund and a number of these law firms that specialize in defending the Christian wedding service providers started doing their thing, the rejoinder on the left was public accommodation. That's what the 1964 Civil Rights Bill was based on. A blogger who's got a very keen mind, and she's a former attorney and lives in the San Francisco Bay Area and had a conversion experience, became one of my kind a few years ago, and kind of has to be circumspect about who she lets know that. That's why she goes by a nom de plume on the internet. But lately I've had a little problem with her. She's become a little more enthusiastic of the very stable genius than I would.
Yeah.
But that's all right.
We've all ebbed and flowed in that regard.
Yes,
so.
yeah. But she still has some very valuable contributions. And the other day she got into all this, and she quoted the relevant portions of the 1964 Civil Rights Bill to show that there's a distinct difference, that we're talking apples and oranges, that public accommodation as as it was applied to that law, does not apply in this case.
Okay.
1, equal access. All persons shall be entitled to the full and equal enjoyment of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, and accommodations of any place of a public accommodation as defined in this section without discrimination or segregation on the grounds of race, color, religion, or national origin. By the way, that's all. Those are the only categories that it spells out. Establishments affecting interstate commerce are supported in their activities by state actions as places of public accommodation. Lodgings, facilities principally engaged in selling food for consumption on the premises. Gasoline stations, places of exhibition or entertainment, or other covered establishments. Got to serve everybody. Got to serve people of any race, color, religion, or national origin. In hotel, motel, or other establishment which provides lodging to transient guests, they're covering the bases on people going from one state to another. Any motion picture house, theater, concert hall, sport arena, stadium, or other place of exhibition or entertainment. And of course, there's a push for an Equality Act now, which would expand that, and maybe that's a subject for another day. But the relevant point of all this is, okay, the difference being, there were states in the American South at that point when this 64 legislation was crafted that had laws saying that it's okay to ban black people from your. Or that black people will not be allowed in certain kinds of establishments.
That's right, yeah.
And so legislation was necessary to override those laws.
I think that's really important that it wasn't Jim Crow suggestions.
Exactly.
They were laws.
Yeah.
They were enforced.
Yeah.
Segregation was not optional for businesses.
Now, I blogged about this, and I excerpted from her blog post, and I later on I said, well, she mentions Milton Friedman in her blog post, and she says, as Milton Friedman famously noted, had Jim Crow not been legislated, it likely would have died away as hoteliers, restaurateurs, and the owners of entertainment establishments ended up competing for the only color that mattered, the lovely green of dollar bills.
Yeah.
And I went on in my own commentary on it a little further down. I said, yeah, that's pretty much what I've had to say for some time. The free market and shifting zeitgeist were conspiring by 1965, certainly by 1967, to relegate boneheaded "we don't serve your kind here"ism to the dustbin of history.
Yeah.
A few well-placed television commercials showing a white couple and a black couple out to dinner in an upscale restaurant and clinking drinks and sharing appetizers and laughing it up would have probably finished it off.
Yeah, and the left often argues, and correctly so, that money is power.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
And
I think the 1890s is when Jim Crow law started to develop.
Plessy versus Ferguson, that Supreme Court decision was a huge move in that direction.
Well, that Plessy versus Ferguson was not
separate but equal accommodations on trains.
Plessy versus Ferguson was 1896. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the separate but equal decision.
It's okay to have them segregated because they'll have just as good accommodations.
It'll be the same. Yeah. Which of course in practice we know that
did not pan out. Yeah.
It was not equal.
Yeah.
After slavery, by the 1890s, so slavery ended in the 1860.
Well, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863.
1863.
Yeah.
So you had 30-ish years for some people got nothing after slavery. Some people got 40 acres and a mule. Some people got, put into indentured servitude, basically, and
the whole sharecropper system.
I'm by no means trying to make the case that things were good for black people in any regard after slavery. It was I couldn't imagine, but for the first time, some, and I'm sure not all, working black people started getting paid money. Right?
Yes.
And money is power. Even if you have a little bit of it, now you have a sliver of power. And now you can go in and you can buy accommodation or you can buy clothes. You can get the stuff that was deprived of you under a system that made you legally, not the market, but the legal system that made you subhuman. Right? And now you're a human being that can go and
plunk down some dollars.
And somebody might go, maybe this guy ain't so bad. You know what I mean?
Let's talk. I think we got a deal here, my friend. Yeah.
Right. And so you have, if the market were left to work, granted, it's not going to be all sunshine and roses. No one here, I don't think either of us are trying to make that case.
Yeah.
But there would have been a lot of transactional situations between blacks and whites.
Exactly.
And those relationships improve. And what happened is that racists, bigots in government saw that happening, couldn't stand it,
and wanted to put the kibosh on it.
They had to put the kibosh on it, exactly. They had to stop it. And the only mechanism for doing that, because the market was starting to take care of this problem,
right,
they had to use the force and tyranny of government to stop it.
Mm-hmm. And that has a lot to do with labor laws of the 1930s, too. Keep Southern black skilled tradesmen out of construction projects. And
that's right.
Yeah.
Because they were willing to work for less money. They're basically forcing the market price of labor down,
mm-hmm.
right? Which you could really blame the white generation previously for, because they had, because of slave labor,
right?
They had bastardized the price
mm-hmm.
system already.
Yeah.
And created a condition where blacks were willing and able to work for less money.
Yeah.
And
even beyond just the scope of race relations and bigotry and everything, and we've talked about this before. The free market solves all this stuff so elegantly. I think we've touched before on smoking.
Mm-hmm.
There was no need for a blanket ban, as nearly every municipality in the country has done now. No smoking in any public establishment. Once again, the zeitgeist, the cultural attitude has been shifting on smoking for quite some time. The
right.
number of people who smoke cigarettes is going way down, and has been for some time. But there's still a market for places that serve those people.
Yeah.
And the vast majority, you hang out a sign or concoct your television commercials or whatever that we don't have smoking here. Wow, all right. Hey, honey, let's go there to dinner tonight. Yeah. There's a certain segment of the population. We do have smoking here. Hey, honey, let's go to that place tonight. And everybody's happy.
That's right. And I was telling you before that my family had run a restaurant like that, and it was a bar.
Yeah.
And we made it non-smoking, mm-hmm. and that was a great market advantage, because there weren't any non-smoking bars, and everybody loved the place. All the non-smokers loved the place. It was flooded. Yeah. And then within
you were
months,
already ahead of the game when the statists came in and imposed a
that's right.
blanket ban.
And they took that competitive advantage away from us. But
which gets us then back to the gist of that blog post I was at, and the difference between the civil rights movement and what's going on now. The free market takes care of that. The only reason a person would pursue a legal remedy, or pursue legal harassment of a Christian provider of wedding services, is to harass them, because you could go get your cake baked down the street by somebody who's happy to take your business and we'll build you an elegant multi-tiered extravaganza for your wedding. Yeah.
This is one thing I really love about free market economics.
Yeah.
Is that there is a litmus test for a business's viability, and that's the fact that they go out of business, right, or they stagnate.
Yeah.
And when you let your prejudices get in the way of the almighty dollar, and you completely, remove a demographic from being your customer, you're really limiting what you can do, and you're giving your competitors an advantage. And there's some greedy capitalist out there that wants that money, doesn't care what skin color the person who's handing it over.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is, folks, why the free market is the best cure for bigotry.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, like you said, removing the incentives, they impose incentives to discriminate, right? You create laws that that enforce discrimination in a free market. If someone is going to be bigoted and someone's going to not serve a particular demographic, and they advertise that, you immediately know who all the bigots are.
Yeah.
And you know who to patronize and who not to.
Yeah.
Because someone refuses to do gay wedding cakes or whatever, I kind of want to know who has that feeling, because I don't want to shop there.
Oh, yeah.
You know
okay.
what I mean?
All right. Egregious bigotry gets kind of sequestered organically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the free market always gets blamed for it, because you saw the words whites only in the window of a business, or a coffee shop, or a burger stand, or whatever.
Yeah.
And that may have been true in a free market. There may have been some places like that. But the government version of that was, you must put this sign in your window.
Yes. And you must is always gets the hair on the back of my neck standing.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. What are we, how are we looking here?
Well, we're about 15 minutes into
All right.
it,
so maybe it's time for segment 2?
I love it.
Okay. Tariffs. Tariffs have a long history, don't they? I mean, there was a lot of use of tariffs back in the 19th century in American trade between the United States and other countries. And that's, which the 19th century is when free market economics and the whole notion of how economic liberty is essential to any other kind of liberty really got going, with Frederick Bastiat and Herbert Spencer and later on Ludwig von Mises and so forth. And these people think all our common heroes. As all that began to get developed, we got to see that some practices weren't conducive to economic liberty, and tariffs being one of them. But all this, the very stable genius not only thinks they're a good idea, he boasts about being tariff man and so forth.
Yeah.
His followers, to use a nice neutral term, point out that they're working. Look at by golly, Mexico backed off. Mexico backed off and of any digging in its heels and agreed to beef up its border with Guatemala and stem the tide of Central American people coming northward and all that. You may have seen the foreign minister of Mexico. I forget his name, but he said, no. We were going to beef up our border before these latest talks with U.S. people, and we don't change our policies about our border policies due to intimidation by other countries. I want to make that clear.
By orange people.
Yeah, and so there's that. Plus, it was clear it was going to throw a real wrench in the carefully crafted new North American trade deal that was going to supersede NAFTA, and Trump's own trade people had carefully hammered that out, and it was going to really throw a wrench in that if they had gone through. Plus, China. We do have tariffs in place with China. As a matter of fact, we got to let's be candid about it. We got a trade war going with China, and got a couple of things here. There was a piece in Yahoo Finance.
I like saying Yahoo. Let's keep saying Yahoo.
Can you imagine trying to explain to people 30 years ago what some of the biggest companies in the country, or some of the biggest information dispensing companies in Yahoo, Google, Twitter.
Right.
These are some of the biggest firms in the information dissemination business in 2019.
How do they make
Man,
money?
those are some weird names. In Yahoo Finance, back about a little over a week ago, there was a piece entitled "Trump's Tariffs Have Already Wiped Out Tax Bill Savings for Average Americans." President Donald Trump's trade wars have already wiped out all but $100 of the average American household windfall from Trump's 2017 tax law, and that's just the beginning. The last $100 in tax cut gains could soon disappear, and then some, because of additional tariffs Trump has announced or is considering. And subtract the tax cut, and the average household will effectively be paying about $3,000 more a year in additional costs. It's giving with one hand and taking with the other, said Kim Klossing, an economics professor at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, who's written a book on free trade. And
isn't that always how it goes too? No one seems to weigh out the differences. The same thing with the $15 minimum wage or whatever minimum wage. They never calculate in the full effect of what's going to happen, of the cost of living going up, the value of money going down. That all has an impact on how wealthy you are. It doesn't matter how many dollars you have. It matters how well those dollars spend over time.
A little more recently, this last week, a few CEOs of some very heavy hitter Fortune 160 companies got together and held a press conference in Washington, D.C. to say, we don't have to talk in generalities. This is affecting our companies. We did enjoy benefits from the corporate tax cut when they first came. Those are gone now.
Right.
And tariffs, and this is one of my problems. The very stable genius, he's got kind of two sets of economic advisors. He's got some good ones like Larry Kudlow and Stephen Moore. And he's got some like Wilbur Ross and Peter Navarro, these protectionist guys, and they both vie for his ear because he has no rudder. He doesn't. This stuff is beyond him. Sorry, Trumpists, but that's old Barnes' take on this. And he's been convinced that because tariffs exert pressure, and he comes from a background, he's a sharp-elbowed New York real estate developer. He's big on exerting leverage and getting tough and all that, and that's what this is all about.
So I don't know, why not be willing to walk away over tariffs?
Yeah,
that's the art of the deal, right? I mean,
there comes a point when a country like Mexico or China said, fine, there's a lot of other trading partners in the world.
Yeah.
A lot of...
Like China and India. My gosh, those markets are enormous.
Yes.
And I remember there was a interview with Tim Cook from Apple, the CEO of Apple, and they were giving him a blast of crap. And mind you, this is a very liberal person, liberal in the modern sense too.
He leans left.
They more than lean left. It's Silicon Valley. They more than lean left. But they're kind of stuck in this dichotomy because they're producers, and the left hates producers. So anyway, he was talking about foreign money, and they were giving him a bunch of crap about how much money that Apple had overseas, and he's like, 2/3 of our business is overseas. You know what I mean? A lot of that in China. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why can't we use money we generate in China without paying American taxes? You know what I mean? Like, where does the line exactly? Where's the line exactly that exists that says when and when we don't owe money? And so far, however that's written in the tax code, we don't owe that money.
Yes.
Change the code then, if that needs to be changed. But to your point, the corporate tax cut went from like 30-some% down to 21.
I believe that's right. Yes.
That's significant. And immediately you saw, companies investing in the United States heavily.
You bet, yeah.
And now that's going to be wiped out. And now the left is going to be able to say, look, those corporate tax cuts didn't work. They were a sham.
Exactly. And it's to use a hackneyed old image, he's cutting off his nose to spite his face, and giving very low hanging fruit to those who would like to, obliterate him if possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
And tariffs, anything that distorts the market value of a good or service has a ripple effect. And I don't want to digress too much, but I had a interesting tussle on social media the other day with about healthcare, which it's easy to get in those. And insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies and blah blah blah, and we need government to take it all over so that because it costs so much, and I'm thinking, no, let's go the other way.
That's why it costs so much.
Exactly. Let's go back the other way so that we can find out what the actual market value of any good or service in this broad category called healthcare is.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And let's allow things that must be expensive to be expensive. And people are going to hate this. We may have to get into a whole healthcare show again.
Yeah.
But most things in healthcare, if you allowed competition, multiple hospitals in a town, such as this one, for example, you allowed people to compete, you deregulated, and you let people buy insurance over state lines and all kinds of things. You just let people be free and buy healthcare how they wanted. Most healthcare services would plummet in price.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of demand for them, right? Now, there's not a lot of demand for some things. You might get a disease or an injury that's just very uncommon. It's unique to you. And the treatments might be, even in a free market, extraordinarily expensive because the supply chains have not been developed to deliver that product or service to many people.
Yes, exactly.
But thank God there's an expensive treatment for you and not no treatment for you.
Yes.
Because that's when insurance could provide some relief. That's when we can use charity, and that's when we have a responsibility.
And now we live in the day and age of crowdfunding and so forth. Yeah.
Absolutely. I see people doing that all the time.
Yeah.
And if we got the price down for the other things, then we could have catastrophic insurance to cover things like that.
Yes. We've trotted this one out on this show before, and you don't use your auto insurance to get an oil change, and health insurance ought to, by definition, insurance ought to cover stuff that you couldn't possibly pay for out of pocket yourself.
Yeah.
And for other stuff,
it's unexpected.
Yeah.
Things. It's not a cold. You didn't expect to get a cold this year. Not one cold.
Yeah, right.
It's winter. It's not winter right now.
Yeah, arrange your budget so that you're saving a little for, just like you do for groceries and vacation and your ongoing bills and all that.
And that's right. And poor people, the argument's going to be that poor people will get left out because they won't be able to afford it. But there's a mandate that says they must buy health insurance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they must buy a product from a company. What's the difference between that and having to buy the healthcare services that they would buy?
Right.
If they were severely or significantly reduced in cost.
And once again, that business of have to, it just old barn starts bristling.
That's right. Yeah. I don't blame you because as we've discussed many times, the most important thing is human freedom, and most of the time, I don't know, maybe 100% of the time, it works better than any type of force.
Yes.
I think the exceptions are people who commit crimes.
Exactly.
Acts of force and fraud against other people.
If I set fire to your house, I ought to expect to have handcuffs put on me and my freedom to maneuver.
Like you said in the last episode, your freedom to swing your arm ends at my nose.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Did you want to get into Oberlin or?
Oh yeah. Let's go ahead.
You're gonna have to prime our watchers on the story because I need prime too, and it's a good excuse.
Oberlin College was actually founded. I'm trying to remember one of the great ministers of the 19th century. Was it Charles Grandison Finney? I'm trying to remember. I have to look it up on Wikipedia. forgive me, I should have, that's some research I should have, some homework I should have done, had already going. But Oberlin has a long distinguished history, but in recent years it's just gone off the rails leftist. I mean, most small liberal arts colleges, with the exception of, say, Hillsdale up in Michigan, but Oberlin is just like exponentially out there as one of the top handful of leftist small colleges in the country. And it's in a little town called Oberlin, Ohio. Mm-hmm. And there's a bakery there that's been owned by one family for many, many generations. It goes back, the bakery was founded probably about the same time as Oberlin College, in the 1800s. And it's called Gibson's Bakery. And there's always been a real good relationship between the college and the bakery. It's located in downtown Oberlin. And sometime back, three students actually, attempted to shoplift, three Oberlin College students attempted to shoplift some wine at Gibson's Bakery. Mm-hmm. And an employee, a young member of the Gibson family, stopped me. Wait a minute, you can't do that. And a tussle ensued, and the police came, and the three students were arrested.
For stealing.
Yes.
And what was the nature of the tussle? Was it
just kind of, you know, hey, I don't know if they said, hey, I intended to pay for that or whatever, but or give me that, I'm going to run out, you know, and so I can run out the door. I don't know those kinds of details, but and it was, you know, it was just a real quick kind of.
Right. Running out the door, grab somebody by the shirt, type of thing. I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's what I imagine type of thing would be.
Something like that. The three students involved happened to be black, African American.
It always reminds me of that George Carlin bit.
Okay.
Maybe I'll dig it up and put it at the end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. But that was really important to some Oberlin students who, in very short order, organized protests and Gibson's Bakery is racist and this was, you know, just a travesty and blah blah blah. And they got backing from the Oberlin administration. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And you kids are really on the right track protesting and all this stuff. The three students were convicted in a trial and made a public statement saying, yes, we were attempting to shoplift that wine, and there was no racial aspect to this. The three students involved made a public statement to that effect. Mm-hmm. Oberlin was still not hearing of it, and this is going to get into some stuff that is, I hope it will give us some feedback.
I think so.
Email or social media or whatever. However
it's
people want to
easy
chime
to
in.
get. I don't know. It's easy to misconstrue points when you're dealing with racial topics and things like that. I think I want to make it abundantly clear that that racism is not okay and racial discrimination and prejudice is not okay.
But it's also not okay to shoplift wine.
It's also not okay to steal. Yeah. And if it's also not okay to disproportionately give minorities heavier sentences than whites and things like that.
Absolutely.
So with that said, let's proceed.
There was a civil suit that resulted in Oberlin College getting having punitive damages levied against it to the tune of $33 million. Oberlin is whining about that, saying this is really going to cause us to cut back on services to students who had absolutely nothing to do with this. And what I would say to that is, cry me a river. Yeah. You have an $887.4 million endowment that grows by $60 million every year.
Yeah.
You're not
right.
Gonna have to deprive anybody's services.
And they should, and if the services become reduced, then they should go to school somewhere else. because you screwed them.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And now, Meredith Raimondo, who is the Dean of Students at Oberlin and an advisor to the president of Oberlin for equity, inclusion, and diversity. Equity and inclusion and diversity, if those aren't too redundant. She passed out flyers claiming that the bakery was racist. That's how all that. She was big, elemental in stoking that whole fervor. She's she comes to her position as dean and as special advisor to the president from being department chair of the Comparative American Studies department, which includes all kinds, gender and body image and
Gotcha.
yeah. You know the
drill,
routine.
yeah.
And so this was a culture war skirmish that turned out favorably, at least in my estimation. But it's just, once again, just so lamentable that it got this far.
Yeah, and I don't think that you do.
Oh, and another thing, Oberlin severed its long-standing contract with Gibson's Bakery to be the supplier for campus functions. And
so they destroyed the livelihood of these people who
yeah.
were stolen from, who were aggressed against.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they get patronized by the townspeople, but Oberlin's a pretty small town.
They're blaming
yeah.
the victim,
Right. And I guess the overall lesson here that would fit within our Venn diagram is let's be very careful and sort out actual facts in any situation where race relations might rear its ugly head.
Right. We've got to be truthful about where it exists and where it doesn't.
Exactly.
And I don't think. I think in media you see the left saying racism exists everywhere,
right,
and the right saying racism exists pretty much nowhere, and neither one of those things are true.
The truth lies somewhere in between.
It's somewhere in between, exactly.
Yeah.
Again, these kids might go into the criminal justice system. They might be treated differently. Maybe so.
Yeah.
But they did steal the stuff, and they said there wasn't a racial element.
Yeah.
Let's at least absolve Gibson's Bakery, the victim of any wrongdoing. And then let's deal with what is wrong with society in that regard. And I don't think it does minorities any good for them to falsely go down a rabbit hole. Again, I don't know this story personally. I didn't read up about this story, but if these kids admitted we stole the wine, there wasn't a racial element, for Oberlin to push that narrative, that doesn't help. It doesn't help black people. It doesn't help minorities.
Larry Elder's very big on that point. Do you like Larry Elder?
I'm not sure.
He's an LA-based columnist and radio host, and I'll send you some Larry Elder stuff.
Oh, okay, sounds good.
He's a great guy. He's black.
He happens to be black.
He happens to be black, but he's very
George
big on
Carlin bit again.
The victim mentality is the opposite of empowering, and hauling out cries of persecution on the basis of a demographic identification instantly without any circumstances being examined perpetuates this victim mentality, which is, like I say, the opposite of empowering.
Yeah, and I would love to hear. I'm sure you would too, Barney. Supporting opinions, differing opinions.
Sure, chime in.
Let's crowdsource how the public feels about this.
Yes. If your views diametrically the opposite, chime in. Shoot us an email or get involved in the comment thread under the YouTube post of this or whatever you'd like to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So should we go to our?
Oh yes, this is fun. And once again, it's a busy world, and it would have been kind of fun to have the time to do the homework to put the videos of these up, which are available. Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, has been on a tear lately, an anti-authoritarian tear.
Okay.
He's signed 4 bills in recent days. One, banning red light cameras at intersections. 2, allowing beer and wine home delivery, just like you can get pizza and so forth. Another one, protecting free speech on school campuses.
Right.
And this other one is one that I think we both find delightful. Eliminating the requirement for proprietors of lemonade stands, who are usually under the age of 10,
to have like a food
for having to have a license. And in each case, he has gone on social media and with a big grin on his face, sitting at his desk, I am now signing this bill, and they're great.
Yeah.
And I just
send me the links to those, and I'll put them in the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But he's just been on a tear, and I'm just, it's really cool. I'd love to see more governors put a little showmanship into their pro-freedom initiatives like that.
Sometimes I just really love Texas. You know?
Oh, yeah. You were in Texas.
It's not perfect.
I don't know, what, about a year ago to visit some
Yeah, a
places?
couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple times.
Yeah.
Well, I've been to Texas 3 times.
Yeah.
And I've liked it
Yeah.
very much. Rural Texas and like Austin are so different.
I know. Yeah. Almost like a microcosm of the divide between rural and urban America generally.
Very much so.
But Austin's fun. I mean, good food and music.
Austin's a blast.
Yeah, and it's kind of
beautiful.
hilly. Yeah, right. And my wife and I had a wonderful time. We stayed in Bernie, which is a little town just north of San Antonio, a few years back, in the hill country.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a third of the way between San Antonio and Austin, and that's a fun little town. Some great restaurants there. And then San Antonio with the River Walk and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And did you go to San Antonio?
No,
yeah. The Alamo. I was historian that I am. I always like to seek out historic sites when I go anywhere. I got kind of choked up at the Alamo. It's now, I've always had this image in my mind of the Alamo as being way out in the boonies, which it was when the battle took place. But it's now right in the middle of downtown San Antonio with skyscrapers all around it and everything. But
that's cool.
They've carefully preserved it, though.
Yeah.
And this is a real testament to how quickly America grew, and Texas grew in the mid-1800s, because the Battle of the Alamo happened in 1836. 23 years later, it had been absorbed into the city. The city had grown around it, and the Menger Hotel was built, and that's where my wife and I stayed. Was in the Menger Hotel in the old section in one of the the Alamo, just real quickly. Of course, there's some people that'll say, "Well, this proves American imperialism or something," but it was Mexico. It was Mexican territory in the 1830s, but Mexico was utterly neglecting it. They weren't establishing anything or developing anything, and so Americans were coming down there. Davy Crockett came down from Tennessee, and a number of people did, and there were little outposts, and the Alamo was one of them. It had been a mission, a Catholic mission, started in the late 1700s, and by the 1830s it had grown into this kind of commune, and they were doing some farming and things like that, and but then people started hearing noise about how Santa Anna was going to bring some troops up and kind of start quelling this stuff, or at least get these people. You're going to have to kowtow, get in line with Mexican authority, and
eerily familiar to.
He sent some advanced scouts out, and they came back and said, "Yeah, Santa, he's about a week away." And so one night, this is. Of course, I'm a little more. This is where the libertarian conservative thing.
This is outside of our Venn diagram.
Yeah, because one night after supper, William Barrett Travis, one of the guys living there in the Alamo compound, asked all the men in the compound to join him in the courtyard, and he took out his sword and drew a line in the dust and said, everybody that wants to join me in defending this place, come on over here. Anybody that doesn't, we will not disparage your honor. It's you have searched your heart of hearts and decided that's the thing to do. But I don't know what you're going to do, because you'll have to just wander out into the wilderness, and because the rest of us are going to do this.
Right.
And one guy said, "Yeah, I'm not going to join you." Fine, we respect that. But the famous scene.
Enjoy being eaten by coyotes.
Yeah, William Barrett Travis drawing his, and of course it was a bloodbath, and they all died, all the men and
all of the Texan revolutionaries.
Yeah. But a couple weeks later, at a battle, San Joaquino, a bit south of there, Sam Houston used the rallying cry, "Remember the Alamo," to get everybody all fired up, and they won that one. But in the Menger lobby of the Menger Hotel, there's a life-size bronze statue of William Barrett Travis unsheathing his sword to draw his line in the sand.
So, I feel like we've got to go down this rabbit hole just a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, because there's Mexico, right? Mexico used to encompass Texas,
right?
Or a significant portion of what is now Texas,
yeah.
right? Okay, so Americans, so the border was way up here. Americans came into Mexico, and settled there, and then because so many Americans had settled there, then we decided that was, and because Mexico was neglecting it, then
somebody ought to be settling this. I think that was their attitude.
That becomes America, and that's okay. Because
well,
that sounds like
now remember,
it kind of sounds like Nevada should be Mexico right now.
Mexico,
because it's being neglected.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Mexicans settling there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So why can't they just own Nevada?
All right. Interesting viewpoint to consider, and once again chime in. But don't forget that for the 9 years after. From 1836 to 1845, Texas was a sovereign nation, the Republic of Texas.
Do they still call it the Republic of Texas?
Yes, I think so. Just
that's
Kentucky calls itself a Commonwealth. Well, so does Virginia.
Yeah. So, and let's not forget the most important contribution of Texas to human existence, and that was former Senator Dr. Ron Paul.
Okay. I was going to say beef brisket. Barbecued brisket.
Yeah.
Or Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys.
I like all those things, but not more than Ron Paul.
Oh, okay. All right.
I mean, if I had to, I could live with Carolina Barbecue and Ron Paul.
Yeah. The great blues guitarist Pee Wee Creighton. We could go on. But but one of their gems is their current to kind of bring things full circle, is their current governor, and you got to see these videos. He just with great relish signs these videos.
I kind of liked their last governor too. Was it Rick Perry? Was their last?
Yeah.
Yeah. He wasn't the best public speaker.
Right.
But I kind of liked his, go to hell. I'm taking care of business attitude.
Yeah, and he's our Secretary of Energy now, isn't he?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, how are we doing?
We're getting pretty close to being out of time, but we're not there yet. Did you want to talk about the Department of Agriculture and the relocation? Is it to?
Oh,
Kansas?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Speaking of cabinet level secretaries, Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue called a bunch of people who were involved in a particular area of activity within the Agriculture Department and called them into a conference room the other day to let them know that the research they were doing, the facility for it, was going to be moved out to Kansas City to be closer to what they were researching.
Right.
And
a great cost savings.
Oh yeah,
the $300 million.
Cost of living is far less in Kansas City than it is in the D.C. Beltway.
Yeah.
And anyway, he announces this, and all the people out in the audience turned their back on him.
How childish.
A few things to say about that. One, if it were a private corporation, they'd have been getting their pink slips within minutes.
Right.
Item B, Yeah, like the cost of living in Kansas City. Speaking of barbecue, Kansas City is a great place to
there you go.
live.
I've been to Kansas City.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm willing to go that far.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's like every city. Like, there's really nice parts and really bad parts.
Sure,
But the really bad parts
Yeah.
are really,
Right.
really bad.
That's true. Item C, yeah, well, I think that there's a bit of Acela corridor snobbery, East Coast snobbery. Oh, yeah, they're sending us out to flyover country or something like that.
Right, yeah.
But also, wouldn't these people, if they're really devoted to their careers and their work, wouldn't they want to be near what they're researching?
Right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't they want to do it more efficiently? So it's costing less to do, which means there's potential to do more of it.
Yes.
And wouldn't they want to be more effective at it? Like you said, being closer to it. Are they in Washington now?
Yes.
So what are they doing
Yeah.
from Washington in regards to agriculture research, especially as it pertains to those areas? They're studying the effects of climate change, for one.
Yeah.
What was the other big bullet point that they were studying? Is it the economic, farm economics? So, wouldn't they want to be close to the people that are doing that actual work?
Yeah. A lot more cultivation of grains and livestock and all that going on in Kansas than there is in the DC Beltway.
Yeah.
Which, and it points up once again, so much of what affects the rest of the country is happening in this little area out there on the East Coast, and all these pointy-headed experts are that never get out to see what they're regulating.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that leads me to two thoughts.
Okay.
One, I had read something, maybe on the link that you sent me, and it may have been something else, but someone was saying that the reason that they all turned their backs is because they perceive this as a way to get rid of people. We're saying, okay, we're moving the whole operation out to Kansas, and if you don't like that, then you got to look for something else. And it was sort of a way to downsize without cutting people, let them cut themselves. And if that's the case,
I think private corporations expect some attrition when they make a move.
You get to choose. If you don't want to move to Kansas, you do not have to.
Right.
Right? If this is worthwhile to you, then you may. You know what I mean? And we get the cuts. You get to follow your path.
This gesture of protest, this turning the back, almost amounts to an assertion that they have a right to their jobs.
That's right, yeah. And I think government jobs become that way. And that's my second question, or my second thought that provoked. Do we need a Department of Agriculture at all?
Yeah. Speaking of people from Texas, you may recall Ted Cruz when he was still in the running for before that tragic night, May 3rd, up in Indianapolis when he bowed out, and the very stable genius was
Indianapolis,
alone standing.
Elvis, everybody.
I know.
We talked about that before?
I think so. But my point being that Ted Cruz had 5 federal level departments he wanted to eliminate. They were energy, education, the IRS, and I forget. He didn't include agriculture, but as far as I'm concerned, he could have.
Ted Cruz is growing on me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look at his actual voting record a little more closely before I say I like him. I
kind of wish that he had done more to address the very stable genius's insult of his wife and his father.
Yeah.
But Beltway politics is what it is, and you gotta.
Did you hear him on? Was he on Ben Shapiro?
I have yet to listen to that.
It was pretty good, and one of the things he was talking about was just like sometimes you just gotta be better. Even if it means you lose, you gotta you can't sling it back. I mean, he's a politician. I'm sure he slings his share of mud. But he seemed to have a little bit more of an elevated perspective on it.
The Department of Agriculture, a whole heck of a lot of what it does is hand out SNAP.
Yeah, for the food
certificates.
stamps.
Yeah. And
I read that was
and
80%
the rest,
of
and a whole lot of the rest of it is subsidizing things like dairy prices and grain prices and so forth, and distorting the market value of goods and services.
Yeah. And funneling all this money up into gigantic corporate farms.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Subsidizing the little guy out of being able to compete in the marketplace.
You bet.
All right.
Well, we do this fortnightly and forthrightly. So you've got 2 weeks to watch this a few times and
really digest it.
And really digest it, and we'd like to hear from folks all across the spectrum.
And we want to do a mailbag episode. So send your notes to barneyandclydeshow@gmail.com. You can also find us at Facebook, facebook.com/barneyandclydeshow.
We've got a Patreon page now, too.
And we have a Patreon page, patreon.com/barneyandclyde. And I know Patreon has kind of been a little less than favorable towards anything with the word conservative in it, and things that are perceived to not be completely over the board leftist, I think.
Right.
They've removed... I don't know. Steve Crowder and some other.
Right. I've been hearing a little about this.
Anyway, so it'd be nice to have other avenues. PayPal and I think ThinkSpot is one that's going to be opening up soon.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson's
launching one. Yeah. We'll see if it's a success, and if it is, maybe that's a way we can monetize the show a little bit better. So and the reason we want to do that, for one, is we want to be able to bring more and better content.
Yes.
Right. We want to be able to have better gear for better sound and better video. We want to be able to spend more time doing research and being able to fact check, and we want to be able to spend more time editing and making the production better. We'd like to have music. We'd like to have, if we have to pay for any videos that we might embed at a future point. We want to be able to make sure we have copyrights and all that kind of stuff in order. And I seriously doubt we'd ever do anything more than break even. But boy, it'd be great to break even.
You bet. So consider all this, and I guess what I'd say, and finally, is thanks. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch.
Yeah. Reading your comments on YouTube, on Facebook, and your emails have been really fun. I've got to get you the email account.
I want to see those.
Okay.
All right. Well, listen. Have a great rest of your fortnight, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. And stay free.
Stay free.